Welcome to Transactional Love Stories. I'm your host, Crystal Hendry, and I'm here along with my co-host, Becky Burdick. Becky, you there?
Hi, I'm here.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Excuse my voice and my possible coughing. I've had a cold for the last couple of days, so this is our first episode, and of course I show up sick, so please bear with us. We decided that we wanted to do a podcast. We decided to throw our hats into the ring out there with millions of other podcasts. And we still feel like, even though there's so much content out there, that we have something unique to bring to the table. Becky and I have known each other since we were kids. We weren't really close friends, but we definitely knew each other growing up in a small town in the Midwest and lost touch over the years and then recently reconnected. Becky has started a blog and has written some really courageous blog posts that I was so impressed by. I saw them on Facebook and I read these posts, and she's sharing some really vulnerable stuff. And so I reached out and we reconnected and decided that we wanted to do this podcast, Transactional Love Stories.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that it reached out to you and meant something to you.
It really did. I mean, and I told you that from the very beginning. I know that the things that you're sharing on your blog are, like I said, really vulnerable things about, kind of family and family secret kind of stuff and things that aren't so
Yep.
pretty. And I really, really admire your courage in doing that because I know that it's not easy to do. And when I mentioned that we grew up in a small town in South Dakota, right? And you're putting this up on Facebook, you know that a lot of people that know you, know your family, are going to be reading this. And I just thought it was tremendously, um, it's like warrior energy, girl, to put that up and out there. I think it's amazing. I do.
Well, then you're going to have to read my blog that I just posted about being vulnerable.
Oh my gosh, I have not checked your blog. I know that you have a new post up. Why don't you share the website with everybody? It's up on our YouTube channel too. Once we get this episode up, you'll be able to see all of that. But what is your website again? And let people know how they can find you.
It's called ittakesjustone.me. So if you log into that website, you'll have all of my posts in there. I did start to number them, so 1.1 is going to be my introductory post. And I kind of follow through my story, and I'm going to go through and touch about all the different topics that um, really goes along with being an abusive situation, whether it's triggers, dealing with a narcissist, the effects of how your relationships are as you meet other people, get married, your children, your spouse, and what it's like from what my mom's point of view, what she went through, what we went through as kids. So it touches on a lot of different subjects that affects us all. So, well, all of us who've been in a bad situation. So
Yeah, no, I
yeah,
mean, go ahead.
I was to say I just put one up on, because I have had a lot of people state that, you're putting yourself out there, you're being vulnerable, and you got to go check out my blog about that.
I definitely need to read it. I am behind on my reading, so I will do that as soon as we're done doing this because I'm definitely interested. I think that again, the reason I reached out is because I could just tell that there were some similarities. I also grew up in a difficult home. I am currently no contact with my entire family, my parents, and I have two younger siblings. Um, I've had a failed marriage, and I hate to say failed, but I'll use the vernacular, that's fine. And a couple of relationships that really took me out. I've had three children and had challenges as a parent as well. We're Gen X, right? So this was the generation we were being raised by boomers. And I think that we are starting to come to realize that those things that were dismissed as just being, well, that's just the way that it was then. And,
Yep.
suck it up, get over it. I think both of us are in the mindset right now that that just isn't good enough. You're allowed to have a pass for a little while, but only to a certain point. And at a certain point, it's no longer sacrificing your own well-being and your own self for another, whether that person is your parent, whether that person is your spouse. The name of the game here is taking care of you, which I think
Yep.
we talked about this before. We tend to neglect as people who are caretakers and codependents and women and mothers. We tend to put everyone else's needs and expectations above our own. And I think that we are doing this podcast and writing blogs and trying to understand ourselves better and the world that we live in. And that's where transactional love stories came from.
Yeah. So, Crystal, the title was your idea, and it's such a fascinating title. Tell
We
us how
we
you
were
came to
we
that.
workshopped it. It wasn't all me, but we definitely,
Yeah, but it was. It kind of was. It kind of
okay.
was. Guys, everyone.
Um,
Yeah.
so we settled on something, and we didn't take a lot of time. We made the decision that we were going to do this, and both of us have had the idea over the years, just as individuals, to start a podcast, right? And I think that the main thing stopping me was not having to be accountable to anybody else to get this thing done, right? So I could always make an excuse as to why I wasn't doing it. And so when the two of us got together, Becky had an idea of doing a podcast as well for quite a long time. And I don't know if her motivations were the same as mine, but I do know that since the two of us have come together, we realize we are accountable to each other, not just ourselves. And
Yep.
we're also wanting to get it done. It is becoming what feels to me my life's work to figure out some of this shit. And so I don't want to wait any longer. So I think we made the decision that we're just going to do this. We didn't really know what we were doing, didn't know how we were going to frame it. We knew we had things that we wanted to talk about, that we have some experience with, that we wanted to get out into the world. So we made the decision, you know what, we're just going to get ourselves out there. We're going to record something. We're going to come up with an email address. We're going to come up with a title. We're just going to do it and get it done. And here we are. So Transactional Love Stories came about by kind of throwing things and ideas back and forth. And we landed on this. And so here's what it means to me from my point of view, right? Love is one of those things that's really difficult to define. I think it can mean so many different things. It has so many ways, so many applications, right? There's love between children and parents and friends and spouses and places and things, right? I'm loving my cup of tea right now. It's
Absolutely.
saving my life, right? I love my tea. I also love Becky for being here, for being who she is. Love is
Aw.
such a hard thing to define, right?
Yep.
So,
And it's something that we kind of guard. I think a lot of us kind of guard it.
oh, I know I do now, especially now, because I feel like I think I've come to some sort of place in my life where I understand that love is infinite, but I also understand that I've treated it as something finite, and that I continue to think that it is a resource that if I give it and it's rejected, or it's not welcome, or it's not reciprocated, then that means that I've lost something. I feel like my
Yeah.
capacity is lowered. So it's a very strange thing.
We
Um,
blame ourselves. We think that something's wrong with us.
sure, sure. Um, so the title itself, Transactional Love Stories. I think what we've decided, the idea for the podcast, is to try to understand where the love in our lives is transactional, and the difference between a transactional relationship or a transactional love story is the difference, I truly believe, between conditional and unconditional love, right?
Totally agree with you on that one.
Yeah. So, what is a transaction? A transaction is, if I give you this, then I expect to get that. right? And vice versa.
Yep.
It's a give to get relationship, right? And
Yep,
when I
absolutely.
did a bit of a deep dive into what transactional love actually means and how we are all affected by this every day, I was kind of fascinated by how it came together and how it plays out in my own life for sure. And when I look around at social media or I look in the news, I look all around me, I see how much we've been conditioned in love to believe that it is a transactional relationship. And
Yeah,
when you have a transactional relationship and you are engaging in relationships that are based upon conditional love, it means that you're not getting your emotional needs met, and that what you're really wanting is to have your own self-interest put before that of the other person that you're in relationship, right?
right,
Because what you're doing is giving in the expectation that if you give this, you're going to get this back, and
right,
if you don't give this, you're not going to get it. Then it makes me feel like our priorities are a little bit skewed, right?
right.
I mean, jump in here with me. Like, I mean, tell
Yeah,
me.
no. Well, like, we've talked, my relationship with my parents, with my mom, unconditional. She loved me no matter what. I always knew that. I knew that if I made a mistake, if I did something stupid, she wasn't going to stop loving me. She was always going to love me,
And that doesn't
and
mean that you're
for
gonna
me.
be it's perfect, that she's not gonna be upset, or that there's
Yep,
not gonna be discussion, or that there's, it doesn't
yep,
mean that, that you can't that it's not going to be smooth sailing just because you are secure in your faith that someone will always love you, right? I think
right.
when you have that, it makes those bumps a lot easier to get through.
Well, and I think like, okay, so if I were to ever have, I say that jokingly, done something, stupid or painful to myself, my mom would have come from a place of love to try and, okay, did you learn your lesson here? Do you know what you did? How do we do it different? What do you learn from it? And that was always my takeaway from her. And granted, sometimes it was, she was a little mad at me, rightfully so, but it was
Sure.
never anything. When somebody comes from a place of love, the last thing you want to do is disappoint that person.
Of course.
And, so, any kind of discipline, and hers was always, like I said, it was from a place of love. She just wanted me to learn and not make those mistakes again. Now, on the flip side, you've got my dad. Now, that was very transactional. As long as I fit into his narcissistic ruling, then things were okay. But as soon as I broke his rules, there was no unconditional love there, and you didn't feel it. His discipline didn't come from a place of love, it came from a place of anger. And you almost felt sometimes the hate. You could see it in him. And, so to back that up, my dad was very physically abusive and also very manipulative to my mom. So, when he came, it wasn't to try and help us learn and correct us, and what can we get from that mistake that we made? It was just to punish and take out anger. So, so it's two very clear different parenting styles, and it completely changes how we view our relationships now. Like, my entire life, all my life's relationships are based on that. And when you talk, Crystal, about transactional love, I sit there and I'm going through all my relationships and I'm like, oh, that one was transactional, that one was
Yeah.
transactional, this one had the potential. But for me, I think when you have, what your parents are supposed to provide, I call it the core love. It's that unconditional love that builds you as a person.
Right.
And when you don't get that from either one parent or neither parent, you tend to put all of your love on guard because you don't trust it.
100%.
That's
I mean, and speaking from my side, I didn't feel that love coming from either one of my parents for my entire life. Have I heard the words? Sure. More so from my mom, but not very often, and much less frequently from my dad. I could count on less than two hands how the amount of times I ever heard my dad say he loved me, right?
yeah,
Um, but more importantly, and I think that's something that we will dig into a lot on this podcast if I have my way, but words are cheap.
yeah,
Action where it's at. So if I look at the course of my life at the childhood home that I grew up in, and then leaving home at 18 and getting as far away from that house as possible, and then getting married and having children, I can tell you that I don't have that bond with either one of my parents. I never felt, and still do not to this day, that there is that love that I can trust. Anytime anything were to go wrong, I was in mortal fear of
yeah,
disappointing them. And I've done plenty of that over the years of not fitting into the type of personality or the type of lifestyle or whatever it was that they deemed as acceptable. When I didn't fit into those, and often didn't, then it was met with disdain. And what that causes is a deep amount of shame and
yep,
guilt and feeling
yep,
that you're not good enough. I have
yep,
never had that feeling of being able to trust that, you know what, if I, let's use politics since that's what's going on right now. I'm actually wearing my Kamala shirt right now. But if I were to try to discuss with my parents my views about what's going on politically in the United States right now, and how I feel very strongly that there are so many groups of people that are being marginalized and not treated as they should be treated as humans. Um, my parents would look at me in disgust. And
yeah,
it is extremely difficult when you have people who, like you said, there's this core feeling that you hope that you're able to derive from, especially a relationship with your parents, that even when things are rocky, it's something that you know they still have and feel for you. But because what I largely have are maybe a few words here or there, and it's more like, well, of course I love you. It's not
yeah,
the real feeling or the real
yep,
action behind it that I've lacked that my entire life. And I'm not saying these things for anyone to feel sorry for me, or
yep.
for anyone to make excuses and say, well, that can't be true. They have to have loved you, right? Like, nah. You know, I
Not necessarily.
well, I'm really big on understanding that my experience is my experience. And this is something I've had to learn a lot recently with my grown children. Understanding that the way that they experienced me as a parent was not necessarily how I thought I was as a parent. And so
Yeah,
it's been really hard to let go of my ego and listen to them tell me where I've failed them. And I have.
yep.
And
And
having your own experience and having other people may not agree with you, but at least validate that that is your reality, that that is your experience. That's something that is really, really, I think, important. And even in terms of what we're going to discuss on this podcast, understand that these stories that we tell about ourselves, or these stories that maybe we're grabbing from the headlines, we need to have a healthy respect that we're not talking about everyone and every time in every circumstance. We're talking about
yes,
our own personal experiences. We are trying to analyze and assess other stories through the lens of our own experience, but also not minimizing someone else's experience because it's not our own. And I think that that is a sign of of unconditional, if not love, at least regard, where I'm not looking to make you feel small, or I'm not looking to make myself feel better by passing judgment and telling someone else that that's not right. That can't be true. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think
Yep.
that I think one of the things that we talked about before we got on to record today was just kind of, and we've touched on it a little bit, right? But contrasting these different relationships in our lives. We've talked about our parents and how there are transactional love relationships in parenting, right? But these things show up all over the place. They show
Yeah.
up in romantic relationships, especially. Think about marriage, for
Mhm.
example. I think we've been conditioned in a lot of ways to believe, even if it's unconscious, that a marriage is transactional, that it is
Right.
that it is supposed to be at best 50-50, right? And if someone isn't pulling their weight, then there's a problem, right?
Right.
And
And there's
so
very little for what, I think there's a lot of room for there to be more forgiveness, and I struggle with where's that line, like how often should you forgive somebody, but then that person needs to pull their weight sometimes too. And sometimes they need to give a little bit back and not just always take. Where is that line? And when is it not acceptable to continue to allow that person to just take from you before they have to start to give back? That's a difficult topic.
it is, but I also, I mean, I can tell you where I stand on that. I'm telling you that my line isn't very far anymore, to be honest. And again, this
True.
isn't talking about making a checklist. And if you don't do the things on this, checklist, if you're not, cleaning the bathroom or picking up your clothes or doing the laundry or cooking dinner or picking up the kids, whatever, that's a whole other kind of checklist. That's tasks and
Yeah.
chores, whatever. And those are things that need to be negotiated within the framework of your relationship. Where I have a problem is thinking that that's the woman's job, right?
Yeah.
That
You
the
know,
man's job is just to go out and work. And because they work so hard that when they come home, they're tired and expect dinner on the table, laundry to be done, kids to be taken care of, not to mention that most households these days are two-income households. So
yeah.
women are working as well, right? So kind of breaking down these ideas of patriarchy, right? But I think the other checklist, the bigger checklist is that line. And it is. I think it's an ongoing struggle, but I don't think that it has to be a horrible struggle. I think it has to be being willing to have ongoing communication throughout and being able to talk about things and care about the emotional needs of your partner going both ways, right? We talked
Well,
about
and
sex. Sex is a big one, right? What
yeah,
if you feel like either way? What if your husband doesn't feel like it? What if your boyfriend doesn't feel like it? What if your wife or your girlfriend doesn't feel like it on any given night, right? What does that mean in the context of your relationship? Is that
yeah,
a transaction where your main goal is to get laid? It's in your self-interest. That's what you want. And if you're not getting that, then what does that mean to you? Well, maybe look at, hey, it's not just about what that means to me. What is going on with my partner? And it could be something so simple as I just don't feel like it. Or, I had a long day, I'm tired, right? But we
yep.
we end up in these very in kind of gross sort of struggles when it comes to getting out of the lens of our own self-interest for long enough to take an interest in what's going on with our partner and
Yeah,
find out,
absolutely.
hey, this isn't just about me not getting this, and this just isn't about me, hey, and maybe I'll punish that person for not getting what I want by giving them the silent treatment, not giving them what they want because I didn't get what I want. That's
Yep.
toddlers, right? But we all do it. And
Yes, we do.
I just think that there are huge conversations around being honest enough to look at your relationship, look at yourself. How are you showing up? How is your partner showing up? And like you said, where's that line, right? And I said,
Mhm.
for me, it's a really tight kind of a line because I know that I've spent my entire life pushing the goalpost back. Okay, well, if you keep doing this or not doing this, then there's going to be this consequence or this whatever. And I end up not being a person of my word. And so for
Right.
me, I think that at this point in my world, the relationships that I want to engage in, I know that I'm not going to keep trying to pick someone that to be in any kind of a relationship that after I get to know them and as I'm getting to know them, is this really my person? Is this a person that I want around me? Is this a part of my tribe? Does this person's values align with mine? Do they get what I'm saying? Do they get what I'm talking about when it comes to these
Mhm.
kinds of things? And if they
Yep.
don't, I'm no longer going to be like, well, it's my job to teach them and I'm going to, you know, show them like, no, I'm not doing that anymore. For me,
Yeah.
yes, I love dialogue, I love engaging, and I love learning. I love all of that. But when it comes to the basics, I'm I'm no longer going to teach you the things that you should be figuring out for yourself. And when I encounter those people who are doing that deep reflection and trying to understand more and engage more with how they show up in the world and how they are in relation with other people, those are my people, right?
Yeah.
And I think it
Yep.
makes those conflicts a lot less painful instead of just choosing people to be friends with because we're lonely or choosing a partner just because we so badly want to be with someone, right?
Hmm.
And deciding that, okay, well, there's all of these kind of things that aren't really, working for me, but I can fix that. I can deal with that. I
Right.
can live with that.
And I
Meh,
think,
that big of a deal to me? No, it's not that big of a deal. No, no more.
yeah. And I think our lines can move. I'm much like you, after my parents had gotten divorced, and I looked at all the damage that was done by my dad's behavior. I'm like, and a lot of the effects of his behavior started to really be noticeable, and we could kind of admit to them because we
Yes.
had to keep it a secret and that didn't really happen and all this other crap. And now we could say this happened, this is what we went through. Then I was able to start drawing those same lines and being like, you know what, I am just not going to put up with shit anymore. And I started drawing my lines like you, and I'm much less tolerant, I'm much less forgiving,
And that's
especially when
okay.
somebody's not trying.
Right. That's okay, right? Like we get to make
Yeah.
those decisions. And like you said, they unfortunately in that particular case that you're talking about, they manifested themselves in the deterioration of your mom's physical health. You could
Yeah,
see it.
absolutely.
It was right there and you couldn't deny it anymore. And
Yeah.
it's unfortunate because I think that that happens a lot. I think that
Oh,
there are
yeah.
a lot of symptoms that come out through our bodies and our health that are indicative of the relationships that we're in. I know for me that that was
Absolutely.
the truth. Um, I was in a relationship just about a year ago. I broke that relationship off, and it was not a good relationship. And it was showing itself not only in my brain, I knew, but it was also manifesting itself in things like losing a lot of weight without trying. I was losing
Mm-hmm.
my hair. I had some gastrointestinal issues. I was stressed and anxious all the time. And these were
Yep.
things that I was kind of pushing to the side because on one hand, all of these alarm bells were going off and my body was trying to tell me, but yet in my mind, no, it couldn't be that. I love this person. This is what I
Yeah.
want.
They
Um,
said they love me, right?
course, right? And there were, there were some actions that were taken that made it feel like it was, a caring relationship, but it's not a one for one calculation. It doesn't work that
Right.
way.
Yep.
So yeah, I think you get to the point where there's something that happens where you just can't deny it anymore.
Right. And here's the other side to it too. I think, like we talked about, um, earlier you mentioned doing like the women's work, right? In the house, she does this, she does that. And the men think, well, I worked hard today. I get to come home and I get to relax and you finish taking care of everything for me.
I
The
I
frustrating
think
part
those
about
norms are I think those norms are changing, right? For sure. I mean, I
sure,
know that it's not that way as much as it used to be, but I still think
but
that
still
there's,
out there.
yeah, of course it's still there. But I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. But I look at those things and I think about so, my husband has been doing a lot of the housework lately. And, as I'm watching him do the housework, I kind of sometimes feel guilty. But actually, I look at him doing the work and I love him enough, like the unconditional part, that I want to get up and go help him. I don't want to sit there and just watch him work while I'm sitting there eating my bonbons, watching my movies. I want to go help him. I don't want him to have to do all the work. And sometimes he's like, "No, go sit down, relax." And I
And
appreciate that. I
sometimes,
do like the time off,
sometimes
but
you can take advantage of that and sometimes not. I mean, I think it's
right,
always a value calculation, right? If you're
right.
sitting there on the couch, like feeling anxious and, oh my God, like I'm supposed to be doing that. Who says?
Yeah,
Who says?
yeah,
Those are rules that I had no part in setting up.
right. And yeah, we feel guilty because I'm supposed to be doing that.
Yep.
That's
Why?
women's,
Because you're a
right,
woman, right?
because I'm a
And you're
woman.
right. Yeah.
And it's okay to sit back, and he wants to do it. He wants to do that for me. That's him showing his love. And so, that's, I think, so, maybe I'm looking at this wrong, but when you have spouses that are like, nah, that's your job, you go do that. That's where I look at those relationships and I kind of question the love between, because it's like, shouldn't be anyone's job. It should be, hey, you don't feel good? Let me do this today. Or you can do this a different day. Or maybe, and we used to do it. I used to go out and I would mow the lawn and he would do the dishes. And because that's what we preferred to do. And, so it doesn't have to be just one way or another. It can be let's work together. Let me help you. I want to help you because you're sitting there working and I just want to help kind of stuff. And to me, that's what it should be more about.
Right. Right. And
I
that's
don't
where
know.
there's the whole, is this a transaction, right? That we're trying to get the
Right,
most out of it for ourselves? Or is this a
right.
partnership where there's a
Yeah,
real caring about the other person and who they are as a person, what they're going through in life or on any given day, right?
yep,
Like that's if that's the place that you're operating from a place of wow, I really care about this person. And so
yeah,
if you're someone who comes home, right? Just like your example, if you're someone who comes home and says, why is the house a mess? I've been working all day. What the hell have you been doing? That sort of a thing, right?
right,
That to me is a clear indication that you don't like that person because that's not
right,
coming from a place of you really care what's going on. It's coming from a place of, wow, I don't like to see a messy house. I don't like not
yeah,
having anything on the table. I don't like that I have to, do whatever it is, or, I don't want to have to look at that. I worked hard, but in the way that I want you to work hard. It is that it to
exactly.
me is not your sign of someone who respects and
Right,
likes their partner and is willing to understand what their partner's needs are.
exactly, exactly. Because you don't know what happened to them that day. Half the time they don't even ask.
Yeah, right. And that's where the
So,
communication comes in, right? You said that
right,
that line moves, and it does move. Of course, perfect. So having those open lines of communication where you're talking about
yeah,
those things. And, I know it sounds kind of trite and it's, therapy speak and trope, right? Oh, we just have bad communication. Okay, well,
more than that.
yeah, it it's a willingness to have communication. And
Yes,
then the communication that you're having, there's all kinds of ways to communicate. And A, you have to be willing to do it. And B, you have to be willing to look at styles of communication that not only you're receptive to, but that your partner is receptive to, right? You have to
absolutely.
be honest with yourself and look and hear the things that you're saying, and understand how the person, your partner or your child or your boss or whatever, how is that person on the other side hearing that? Am I coming from a place that shows that I'm really engaged in this and that I really do want to come up with a solution, not
Mm,
communicating in a way that is lazy and isn't showing any sort of real desire to engage or resolve or learn
right.
in a way
I'm
that,
telling you what I want, and you need to figure out how you're gonna accomplish that,
yeah, no, that doesn't work.
basically. Yeah.
No,
And,
that
some of those conversations are hard. I remember, when my daughter was a teenager, oh my gosh, we were like oil and water.
yep,
And, there were times I tried different modes of conversation, short of even saying, I don't know how to talk to you. I would just thought, you have to help me. Um, that didn't happen even with her being a teenager. It wasn't until later where we could sit down when she became an adult, and we could sit down and go back to some of that. So,
sure.
but I tried to show that I wanted to have that conversation. And I think that's a very difficult, we talked about teenagers earlier, and kids. I remember with my mom, when I was a teenager, she could do no right, most of the time.
Yep.
And I know my daughter thought the same thing about me. And so, hey, if anybody's got any tips out there on how to talk to a teenager and get them to engage and not think you're an idiot, I'm willing to listen, although
I
I'm past that stage. But
I think
the,
it's lowering I think it's lowering your expectations, but not to the point where you give up trying. I
right.
believe that it's important to, and I think especially as mothers too, I know this is something that I've grappled with a lot, is thinking that the teenage angst that my children were displaying really had anything to do with me. It didn't. They were going
Yep.
through so much in their own lives, right? Because during those times, that's when they're really starting to figure out who they are as people. They're interacting with their friends and their peers so much. School is a nightmare. They're trying to
Yep.
do all these things. Then you've got puberty and hormones, and then for our kids, which we didn't grow up with, was having a phone in your pocket and having
Yes.
access to so much information, bad and good, 24/7. So
Yeah.
it's overwhelming. And the hardest part, I think, for me was to get past my ego and understand that their unwillingness or their lack of desire to talk to me about their deepest, darkest, or whatever it happened to be on any given day, it wasn't about me. It wasn't
Yep.
about me. It was about them. And the best shot that I had was trying not to go DEFCON 1, immediately into rage, right? And I was
Yep.
not often successful, I'll be honest. I grew up in a household of screaming and yelling, and there was plenty of
Yes.
screaming
Same.
and yelling of my children. But I think that your willingness to step away from ego, understand that not everything is about you, that it is about them trying to figure out who they are, and
Yes.
and coming from the place of, this is really frustrating right now, this is really hard, but
Yep.
again, that unquestioning love, that no matter what, I've got your back through this. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter what happens. It may be really difficult and hard, but you've got to
And
know.
just say that, you know, I got your back. I know times are tough. I love
Yeah.
you no matter what.
Yep. And not have that be a transactional relationship, to not consider them not
Yes.
responding or giving you a shitty response as
Yep.
you not getting what you want. So then you removing your care and your love from that situation because your feelings are hurt.
Right. It's not about you and your feelings.
Right.
And it's not about being their friend. I mean, I can't state that enough. It's about being a parent, teaching them how to go out and be a viable adult for their life. It gets so many people, well, God, if I say no, they're going to be mad. Oh no, they're mad at you anyway. You woke up and you're breathing. They're mad at you. So it
Right,
doesn't really matter if you tell them they can't do this. Tomorrow they're going to be pissed about something different anyway. So
right.
your job is to be a parent and set guidelines and boundaries and
Yeah,
teach them the best, you know, how to figure things out, how to come to a plan that's not going to hurt them and, hopefully help them and maybe throw in some mild, easy to suffer from lessons, but nothing that's going to take them out and the peer pressure on top of everything. I mean, I remember being there. It's so clear in my head. Unfortunately, having a really good memory sucks in that department,
no
but
kidding, right?
it was hard at best. And, we had the extra things, my dad was an idiot. We did not have money. So of course you get made fun of for all that fun stuff. And,
Yep.
um, you know,
It's really
when
hard, those
you,
are really hard
yeah,
years, right? Um, and knowing even if you set those guidelines, even if you set those boundaries, right, it doesn't mean that they're not going to cross them. It doesn't mean that they're going to do
absolutely.
the exact opposite of what you've communicated you don't want them to do. And I always say this, right? I was very much like that. I
Mm,
was going to do what I wanted to do. My parents would always say, well, if you just would have done it my way, could have saved you a lot of headache or heartache or whatever. And that's probably true, but
yep.
that doesn't teach you anything. It's those
No.
hard lessons that you have to learn and that you have to go through to teach you, and they all have to experience it on their own.
Yep.
The experiences that they have are the ones that they're going to learn from, whatever those are. And if we keep them in a box and keep them tightly locked up so that they can't ever do anything, they're not going to learn, right? So
Right.
I have a good friend of mine who has a son in college right now, and she is losing her mind over he's in a college that's far away from where she is, and so she's freaking out because she doesn't have 24/7 access to him, and he's living in a dorm and he's partying and he's doing college student things, right? Won't
Yep.
respond to text sometimes, all of that, right? And so much micromanagement about what he needs to be doing, what he should be doing, all of that. And
No.
I get it. I get it. I get you're worried. I get you're scared. But I also understand that at a certain point, it seems to make sense to me that you have to, at this point, as a child in their early 20s, they know what your values are.
Yeah,
They
they
know
should.
what your expectations are. They know all
Yep.
of that. But your days of active parenting are over.
Yeah.
If
Well, and
they're,
here's the thing.
yeah, go ahead.
Your your job to have set them up for that should have, like you said, your active parenting, you should have already instilled those values in them.
Right.
You controlling them is only going to make them buck everything you say.
Sure.
So you should have done that a long time ago. And if you still need to micromanage them, I'm sorry, I'm going to say it, you didn't do your job.
Well, either that, I mean, I think it's the same thing though. It's the transactional thing, right? Like there's
Right,
something
right.
inside of her that is making her feel like if he doesn't do those things that she wants him to do, it makes her a bad parent. And I
Yeah,
don't think that that's true. What I think
right.
is that allowing your child to be who they are, allowing them to fail, allowing them to go through the things that they need to go through to become the person that they are, that's
Yep.
ultimately, I think, what we all want. And so, if this kid parties too much and flunks out of school, does that mean that you're going to withdraw your love in favor of disgust and disappointment? A lot of parents
Yeah,
do.
they do.
But
Do what I
instead,
want you to do.
Instead, I would look at it from the lens of this is a child that I brought into this world that I love, and this is some difficult stuff. I'm going to love my child, but there are boundaries, right? There are limits, whatever it is, but there's got to be that feeling that your child
Yep.
has, that no matter who they are, no matter what they do, that you don't think that they're a horrible person,
Right.
and that you
But
will still
my mom,
continue to love
my mom used to tell me, because there were some things I did go ask, because there were some rules I wanted to break. And she said, "Oh, well, I can tell you no, and you know that, and you know what you should do, but you're just gonna go do what you want to do anyway. Please do it safely." And
I
I
love
tell
that.
you, right? It really made me stop and think. And there were things that I'm like, just because she said that, it changed my mind, and I decided not to go do something. And if
Yeah,
did
really
it,
important.
I sat and I thought about it the whole time, like, okay, let's mitigate my risks in this situation. And it wasn't
Right.
often that I did it anyway. I can only think of one thing, but um it because she gave me that freedom to be an adult and make that choice. And as teenagers, that's what we want. We want to be treated as adults. We think we are that. And she gave me that. She laid down her values just in that statement, that I knew what I needed to do, and I did not want to disappoint her.
Yeah. And I think I think that's a really healthy way of showing love to your child, that you are respecting who they are and respecting that they are at some point allowed to make their own decisions. And some of those decisions are really good ones,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yep.
it's not all bad, but it gets back to this whole idea of our relationships and
Right.
where we find ourselves being transactional. And when you're being transactional in these relationships with people that you love and that you care for, I think you have to be very careful, because when you are prioritizing your own needs and your own self-interest over that being able to grow together and understand each other more, you're
Hmm.
you're it's really risky. And
It
I
is.
sets you up for failure.
I feel like I was just gonna say, I feel like that'll backfire at you every single time. Because
Yeah.
eventually, if you're not coming from the right place, it's gonna you're not gonna hide it. It's not like you can fake feelings. So, it's gonna come back, and the other person's gonna recognize that that's where you're coming from. And if you aren't gonna be on that same track, that other person's gonna walk away, and you're not gonna have that relationship that you thought you were trying to manipulate yourself into having.
Yes, I think that's really, I love that phrase, the relationship that you're trying to manipulate yourself into having.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean,
I say the same thing. Sorry.
no, no, no. I think that's really, really important, because I think we do that to ourselves a lot, right?
Oh
I think
gosh,
that
yeah.
we are, not only guilty of trying to manipulate others to get what we want, but we're also trying to manipulate ourselves into thinking that what we want is really what we want. And when we take
Yep.
really hard look at it, it's like, really, is this really what I want? I don't know.
Yep.
What do I
Yep.
ultimately want, and what am I doing to 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 make that happen, to make that exist in my world? If you want close relationships with, your girlfriends, or close relationships with your children, or close relationships with your parents, right? How are you showing up to do that? Or are you just allowing yourself to believe that these are the nature of what these relationships are supposed to be? So by default, because you're my parent, that means I should have a relationship with you. Because you're
Right.
my child, that means I should have a relationship with you. Because we've
And
been friends for so long, we should continue to be friends. Even though,
right.
when you look at everything as a totality, is this really working for me? What am I
Yeah.
doing? And what am I allowing? And how is that all really working? And then it's time to maybe reassess.
But I hear it so much, especially, coming forward with my story. So as we continue to do podcasts, we'll get into both Crystal and my stories. But I no longer speak to my dad. That was a choice that I gave him. I said, you're either going to, here's transactional, you're either going to stop treating my mom like shit, or we're going to walk away from you. And he chose to walk away. And so,
Oh,
people sit there and say, well, don't you feel guilty? No, I don't feel guilty. He made that choice. Well, you haven't spoken to your dad. That's your dad. So just to kind of back up what you were just saying, he's my dad, but he's the one who wanted to continue to treat my mom like crap. So we walked away. We gave him a choice. We're not going to let you treat us like crap anymore. So,
so you can
um,
either look at your own behavior and see where you can maybe do better, or
exactly.
you don't have access to us anymore. And just like you
Right.
said, he made that choice.
He made it. We just put down our boundaries, and um you know that was his choice to continue stalking my mom after we said no contact. He made that choice. I didn't make him do that, so sorry. But you're not required to love a parent that treats you bad just because they're a parent. And I do hear that from people all the time, but that's your mom, that's your dad, or whoever is going through that situation. And people tell them that. And they
Yep.
make them feel guilty for staying in a relationship that's damaging to them just because it's whoever it is. And it's like, no, that's not part of a transaction. That you continue to get crapped on and hurt, but you have to stand up and keep taking it again. You have to decide for you when enough's enough.
Well, and I have so much to say on that particular subject, but yeah,
Yeah,
I'm not in contact with my family like I mentioned before, and that that belief that because someone has that particular position in your life, there's just this belief that they're owed a relationship. It
yeah,
is it is one of the biggest fallacies I think that exists, and it's something that I am actively challenging and wanting to challenge because it's never an easy decision to go no contact with a family member.
yeah,
It's not something that you just decide, oh, they pissed me off, so I'm out. It's
right.
years and years and years of all kinds of things that you get to the point where you're finally like, why am I doing this? What's
Right.
in it for me? And when the only thing that's on the pro side of the list is that they gave birth to me, and the rest of the list is a con list a mile long, you need to be smart about what's good for you. And make no mistake, doing what's best for yourself is always okay.
It is, no matter who it pisses off.
Yeah,
And, I look at it as, well, if I don't care who you are, if you're going to be pissed at me for doing that, then you don't care about me the way that you should. So you can
right.
step out of my life too then.
Yeah, exactly. And that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad
No.
thing. We're not for everyone. I'm not for everyone. I'm actually for very few, I think. But I mean,
It's so easy to get
that's
along with.
just the thing. I'm no longer concerned if anyone likes
Yeah.
me. I'm no longer really concerned if someone doesn't like how I'm doing life. That's okay. That means that I'm not your person and you're not my person. And that's okay.
Yep.
Go out and exist in the world and find your people. And that's what I want to do
Yep.
is find people. And that's what I think we're trying to do with this podcast. We're trying to find our people. We want to
Yes.
talk to people about these things that are really difficult to talk about. These are things that can affect your life in really, really significant ways. Um,
Absolutely.
so that's what
In every aspect.
yeah, that's what Transactional Love Stories podcast is here for. Becky and I want to talk to you about, the relationships in your life and how through the stories that we bring to you and the experiences that we bring to you can help you navigate your way through this messy thing that we call life. And yeah, there are a lot of podcasts out there. Take your pick, whichever one. And the only thing that I think that this podcast has that no other podcast has is us. We are unique. We're
Exactly.
Becky and we're Crystal. And I know that when I listen to a podcast and if I like your style and I like your voice, I'm going to stop and I'm going to listen. So there are going to be people out there who we will resonate with, and that's who we're looking for. You are our people, the people that are interested in the topics that we're talking about, like the sound of our voices, want to get to know us a little bit better and want to be a part of something that I think is really important.
Agreed, agreed. And,
Yeah,
my hope when I started my blog was if I can help one person, that's why I have the title. It takes just one. And if I can help somebody, even in just a small way, everything was worth it. All the time, putting my story out there, um, everything was worth it just if somebody can be helped. People
absolutely.
will come back. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say absolutely. And that's a transaction that I can get behind. That if you're
Yeah,
putting this out there in the hopes that you're going to help someone, it's very satisfying. It's self-satisfying.
yeah,
You feel like you have a purpose. You feel like you're doing good in the world. And I think that that is, again, a transaction that I wholeheartedly support. We are getting something out of this. We are learning how to heal from some of
yes,
these traumatic things that we've gone through and continue to go through. And if part of that healing is giving you our transactional love stories and you give us back good feedback and let us know that something that we're doing is helpful to you, then yeah, that's an even exchange that I can totally get down with.
absolutely, absolutely. People will say from time to time, if I would change my life, blah, blah, blah. It wasn't easy. So much of it wasn't easy, but I can't change the past. But I can take what I've been through in the past and I can learn from it and I can hopefully help others learn from it. So would I change it? No, because I wouldn't be this person today. And I really like how I turned out.
Yeah,
So
that's really it's important. Yeah, it's been a rough
yeah,
road, right? But when I look in the rear view, I've had a pretty full life and continue to have one, and I wouldn't
yeah,
change it either because it all got us both right in these seats in this moment, in this chair right now. You're in South Dakota, I'm in
yep,
Mexico. So if there are any sort of technical issues with the sound, and I apologize for my coughing, we are doing this really remotely and doing the best that we can to bring you the best quality that we can, knowing that we're going to be a little lacking in that area, at least until I get back to the States. So maybe that's a good place to wrap up. What do you think?
I think that's a good spot to stop. We invite you to give us feedback, share your stories if you're willing. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to, if you want to share your story and have a story and have us share online, um, or make that be part of our podcast. Let us know all that because, there's so much valuable information that you all have that we can all learn from. So, we'd love to hear from all of you.
I love that. Email us your transactional love story. We can talk about it. We
Yeah.
have an email address. It is a Gmail address. It is TL stories, plural, not the word plural, but stories info@gmail.com. So TL stories info@gmail.com. We're going to have this up on YouTube, so you'll be able to find our contact information there as well. We're working on getting a Facebook group up and running, and we'll be happy to tell you more about that in the coming weeks. And in the meantime, that's Transactional Love Stories. We're really looking forward to sharing with you and and hoping to untangle some of this stuff that is really, really important work to do, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you so
All right.
much.
Till next time. Yes, thank you.
Bye.